Hello, and welcome to the Unsung Cyberhero Adventures TV network. Today's show focuses on next generation identity management, and I'm your host, Gary Berman. Our mission is to shine the light on the people and organizations who keep us safe online while at work, home, and school, and to serve as a business to business networking platform for the cybersecurity and IT communities. We've learned that 62% of human communications is nonverbal. That's why we include a video feed so that you have the option of seeing our guests or simply to just listen. That's also why we're called a TV network. We're all about information sharing and business to business networking. Well, we have a great show today, including Andrew Shikiar, the Executive Director and CMO of the FIDO Alliance, who will provide details on a brand new initiative from FIDO that is focused on establishing a consumer logo, the iMark, for sites that are replacing passwords with simpler and safer means of user logins. The timing of our next guest, Dr. Georg Antoniou, is amazing because just last week he was awarded a U.S. patent for a breakthrough innovation in identity access management utilizing the blockchain ecosystem to improve cybersecurity. We'll begin today's show by hearing our guests' origin stories and learn about their missions. Then we'll cover the rationale to reimagine passwords and identity management and share real-life stories of cybercrime, answering three questions. What happened? What were the consequences? And what were the lessons learned? We'll discuss best practices regarding identity management and how to keep yourself and your family safe while online. All of that and more on today's episode. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Andrew. So good to have you here. Hey, George.
Hello, Gary. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us.
Well, both of you are just terrific examples of why you were doing this show. You are unsung heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe, because the only time you hear about, hacking is when the black hats win. What about all the millions of people like you, not just in cybersecurity, but in law enforcement and everywhere else who keep us safe? So thanks for being, real life unsung heroes. And so, Andrew, you and your organization were some of the first folks that I met in my kind of Forrest Gump journey into cybersecurity several years ago. So tell us a little bit about your origin story. How did you get into cybersecurity and develop a passion for it?
Yeah, sure, Gary. Thanks. So myself personally, I got involved in the identity space back in 2001. I was working for Sun Microsystems at the time, and we launched an initiative called the FIDO Alliance. And this was also my first exposure to kind of working with a multi-stakeholder organization. At that point, the internet was relatively new. The concept of identity and digital identity was very nascent at the time. And there were external threats to how the internet would maintain open and its openness and independence. And what Sun and a band of true heroes came up with was an open standard for federated identity, building on some of the work happening in the OASIS standards body. FIDO Alliance established the first standards for federated identity, which allows for anyone to establish an identity and log on to sites from any service provider, and then through federation protocols take part seamlessly with single sign-on to other sites. And that's how I got involved in the identity space and how I got involved with cybersecurity. I got involved with FIDO Alliance in 2016 to help lead its marketing efforts, and I've been fortunate enough to have been driving its marketing and its overall growth over the past couple of years as we move into this very exciting period where FIDO authentication is poised to start replacing dependence on passwords for websites and applications at global scale.
And for our audience who may not be familiar with the FIDO Alliance, tell us a little bit about your mission and your impressive members.
Yeah, so the origin story of FIDO is far more exciting than my own origin story. FIDO Alliance was created really to address the data breach problem, right? I mean, it's hard to pick up any sort of technology newsletter these days and not read about a data breach or some sort of hack or credential spills and things like that. And so FIDO was sought out to address the data breach problem by solving what is really the tip of the spear of that problem, which is passwords. All right, so passwords cause the vast majority of data breaches, whether that's by leaving open a backdoor to a database, or letting someone be duped for their credentials to access the database, or a variety of other means. Passwords really are the weak link in protecting both individual systems and services from bad actors. And so FIDO was formed in 2012 and launched in 2013 with this goal: reduce industry reliance on passwords in favor of modern FIDO-based authentication. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but what FIDO does is it creates a standard-based way to implement public key cryptography that allows users to authenticate locally to their devices rather than depending on passwords and shared secrets that sit on a server. The problem with server-based authentication is that anything that is on a server can and will eventually be stolen and hacked into. And if it's a password and it's user credentials, you both have an initial problem, through that initial data breach, but also an ongoing self-perpetuating problem as these credentials, make their way onto the dark web, are purchased, stolen, and reused for attempted credential stuffing attacks on legitimate websites, which leads to more data breaches, more credential theft, and so on and so on. So what FIDO's singularly focused on is moving the world from this outdated approach of server-side shared secrets to one that allows users to authenticate simply to the devices that are in your pocket every day, like your phone or a security key or touching a PC, whatever it might be. You authenticate there locally, and then the authentication credentials never leave that device. Instead, the private key interacts with the public key on the server, and that's how you're authenticated. That's probably a lot more description than you need. The key thing to understand is authenticate to the device in the same way you are every day to unlock your phone, for example, to sign into websites. It makes
Well,
it much better user experience.
We're definitely going to come back, to this. I think our audience will be incredibly interested in what you're saying, including some of the details. But before that, let's turn to Dr. Georg Antoniou, referred to as Dr. G. Dr. G, you were involved in the private sector for many, many years in various cybersecurity roles, and then most recently made the switch to academia, and that led to the filing of a patent. I mean, what a cool origin story. Tell us about yours.
Yes, thank you, Gary and Andrew. I'm seeing a lot of complementary areas here with the discussion and going forward with what we're going to be discussing. Gary, you know my journey coming from industry, working in very various Fortune 500 companies. One of my biggest projects actually was in one of the biggest, largest company globally, 21st largest company, 500,000 employees worldwide in 86 countries. And one of the projects was identity and access management. Passwords, like Andrew mentioned, it's the Achilles heel for everyone out in the industry and in the consumer sector. People, they just write in, they forget the passwords, social engineering and stuff. So I have passion for cybersecurity since day one. When I guess I was born and I got into the university, got my degrees in computer science. My first job was back in the days, in securing PBXs from hacks and stuff like that. As I was growing up and I was going through the journey in my career, I wanted to do something more exciting, and that's where I got my PhD in cybersecurity. I wanted to do more research and teach, contribute back to the body of knowledge. That's what I make the jump, I would say, and I came to the academia, started teaching, and also started working on my patent. A couple of years ago, I put a provisional patent for digital identity utilizing microchips with a higher encryption algorithm, and utilizing the blockchain as a vehicle of providing a digital identity to devices. And you will see how this approach and this method, this pattern will complement what Andrew is talking about with FIDO and the passwords. There are a couple of things that we are challenging in the world right now is who we are as a humans. We always be challenged, who we are and how can we prove that. But we forget about the most important, other important aspect, which is the devices, the IoTs. There are projections by 2021, there will be 21 billion IoTs in the industry, and projections by 2025 that there will be 72 billions. Imagine 72 billion devices that they're going to be out there interluded, in a fabric that people, they will bring them to the corporate America, to the companies, working from home, having them in their pockets, wear them, wearables, they're actually fashion. There's a fashion trend going on, right now that they're designing clothes that they are smart clothing, those are IoTs. We have pacemakers, you have all these other things, self-driven cars, drones. In 5 to 10 years, you will see all this that they're going to be interconnected. How going to be identify them and giving them an identity is a challenge. And on top of that, to what Andrew said, you have the device. It's a smart device. You have an application. Now you also need to use this application to sign into that service. How you will do it. In the old days, we were doing passwords. We write the passwords down, or we answer challenging questions, or we have some type of single sign-on and things like that. So you will see how these areas, it will complement each other, and how this is going to revolutionary and disrupt the way we're doing business in the future.
Wow. So other than that, nothing's going on, huh?
Impressive.
Exciting times.
Andrew, what do you think about what you just heard from George? This is the first time you would have heard this from him. What are your initial thoughts?
I think it's important and very interesting work that you're doing, Dr. G. And you hit on one point that I think is really important, something that FIDO's focused on as well, which is IoT. So whereas FIDO, our specs are very focused, our initial set of specs are focused on user authentication and taking the password out of user authentication. Likewise, I think it's very important to take the password out of IoT. And you hear about some of these very well publicized hacks into baby cameras and things like that. They're very sensitive, very emotional, and you get that intuitively as a human being. You understand the threat that poses. So you got to take the password out of that, but also there's a productivity thing to think about as well. So we've launched an initiative to create bring FIDO authentication to IoT, focused on secure device onboarding. So yes, it addresses those, again, emotionally evocative consumer use cases, but also think about the industrial use case. Say you want to onboard a bunch of smart meters. They just, a street near my house just brought on a bunch of smart meters, and every 30 feet there's a smart meter. Mm-hmm. If you could take reduce the time from onboarding each of those meters from 5 minutes to 5 seconds, think about the productivity gains, and then how much money can be saved, and how much easier and more efficient is actually bringing these things on board securely without having to worry about hacking them. There's a lot of benefits to actually looking at better authentication for IoT, which is one reason why we're starting to tackle that. Yep. And it's interesting. It's a wide open space. Everyone cares about IoT. I think that the projections for IoT have been wildly huge for several years now, and they've been accurate. But it's hard to get your head around a billion, let alone 20 billion or 70 billion devices. And what's happened, I think, is that that this pace of innovation has outpaced the ability to think about secure underpinnings, which is why you see different initiatives out there to kind of address different aspects of security and onboarding and stuff like that. So we're excited about the work we're doing at FIDO because it brings together a lot of these disparate stakeholders to focus on this, and I think it'll be complementary to what you're talking about.
Yep. Absolutely, smart meters, smart cities, is the way that the whole world is going, and during the research and my experience in the industry, the gap actually comes down to if we put our security hats on for a second, it comes down to the endpoint. And what's the endpoint? It's the IoT that you have. And we see different things out there, or different areas of encryption. Most recent, we hear end-to-end encryption, and as of June 2nd, when the patent is granted, what we done, we actually took 2 microchips, 64-bit, and we fused them with I2C protocol, and we generated a 512 algorithm. Utilizing 10C, and I'm not going to go into the cryptography here, but the reason is, why we're doing it, and it's my pet peeve. The IoTs need to have a point-to-point encryption. When you have a point-to-point encryption from the device all the way to the ecosystem, to the internet, to the other point, and you do the encryption on a point-to-point, there's no way that you can compromise that channel, where in end-to-end, I can challenge anybody out there that I will be able to get the device compromised or eavesdrop into what is going on, because there's a air gap between the device and the software that is there. So that's one part of the part. And the other part is we married the microchip with what we call an identity and access management. And you touch a little bit about PKI certificates, which is part of that, to utilize what the blockchain. And when we say blockchain, most people, their mind goes to cryptocurrency. We have nothing to do with cryptocurrency. We have nothing to do with Ethereum or Bitcoin. We're just getting the blockchain, actually the database ledger that is out there, and we're utilizing the blockchain to do what we're doing. We utilizing the blockchain to do an authorization, an authentication, validation, and verification. Okay, using what we call a ZK protocol, zero knowledge protocol. And if you're familiar with the zero knowledge protocol, if you have a device and I have a device, and we're part of this ecosystem that we call point-to-point encryption, you log on into an app without a password, of course, like you said, and those devices now, they can communicate back and forth in a secure transaction manner. And imagine you have an ecosystem with all these devices doing that. You are limited, and you said it very well, you enhance the security out there. You become more effective, more efficient to get these smart meters in production, to get those self-driven cars, to communicate between each other, to get a smartphone, to do a transaction, purchasing, a product on the internet. Also, the validation comes to place. When a device is not part of this ecosystem, it's going to mark it as not valid. Meaning, you're going to say, this is not part of this ecosystem. Do you want to trust it or do a one-time transaction with them and so forth? So the patent, it's about 100 pages long, has 42 diagrams and 18 claims. I told Gary before, it took us about 2 years, and he knows me, meeting at the local coffee shop, and we were talking about, and I was throwing him a little bit of an update there and there, about what is going on. But it's exciting, it's disruptive, and I'm glad that we're talking here, because I see a lot of areas that they're complementary to each other.
And Andrew, so you have a very unique perch in which to assess what you've just heard, and you hear, probably everything, pertaining to identity management. What's your initial impression of Dr. G's use of the blockchain?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, right? I mean, so by the way, kudos to all of us. We've nailed 2 of the biggest buzzwords in the industry today, IoT and blockchain, within the first 7 minutes of recording the session. So I think we're ahead in the bingo scorecard. I think it's very relevant, right? I mean, and I think, first of all, Dr. G's right. People think blockchain, they think cryptocurrency, but in our space, there's a lot of conversation around authentication to the blockchain, and decentralized identities is a big kind of adjacent topic to FIDO. Right. So again, FIDO's focus is quite narrow, right? Intentionally narrow, focused on user authentication. It's decentralized in nature, right? So what I was talking about, again, is moving away from centralized identity stores to one where you're authenticating locally, or centralized authentication, to one for authenticating locally or decentralized authentication. That's really what we're talking about. So there's some natural fits there, and there's some companies looking at bringing FIDO for user or process authentication to the blockchain. I think there's an interesting fit. When you take the leap into the IoT and the industrialized space, I think again, much as we're trying to take the paradigm shift of bringing FIDO to the IoT, I think it's a similar leap in thought and process that would potentially bring this approach to authentication to the blockchain as well. FIDO is not undertaking work actively in the blockchain space or the decentralized identity space, but it certainly is applicable, and there's individual companies who are looking to marry the two together. There's a Decentralized Identity Alliance, I think that's the name of it, in Korea, that's doing similar work. In fact, one of the founders of that alliance is one of the co-founders of FIDO, right? So it shows you how there's some very common DNA in the approaches that we're talking about.
And so, Andrew, I mean, one of the exciting things, and I think you also just were announcing this in the last week or so, is your iMark initiative. Why don't you share with our audience what it is, the problem that you're attempting to solve, and how the iMark solution can help.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how FIDO works, and I kind of in my long rambling origin story talked about this a little bit, but again, what FIDO is trying to do is reduce reliance on passwords in favor of more user-friendly authentication. Actually, something else Dr. G was talking about was talking about usability, and I think usability is very important. So what FIDO is trying to do, our tagline is simpler, stronger authentication, and the stronger piece has been proven, right? By using public key cryptography, FIDO has an approach that's been proven to be unphishable, which is a lot of it goes back to the whole password and data breach plague we're talking about. But what we've learned, so FIDO's first specs came out in 2014. We saw adoption of our specs both for native mobile applications and for second factor authentication on top of a password. Our most recent set of specifications brings FIDO to the platform, and so FIDO web authentication has been brought to web browsers. Every web browser supports this, and it's also now in major platforms. Right, so every Android handset, Android 7 or later handset supports FIDO authentication. Every Windows 10 PC supports FIDO authentication. Every major web browser supports FIDO authentication, which means, so in total, over the course of 2019 into 2020, we've added over 2 billion consumer devices that can now consume FIDO authentication, which is great, right? Now, the average consumer doesn't know what this means. They don't know what FIDO is. They know what Face ID is or Touch ID or maybe Android fingerprint. The fact of the matter is those processes often overlay on top of FIDO. The other thing is that we want people to start understanding they can use this method to log in using, say, your biometric on your Android phone or on your Windows 10 PC or even on the MacBook. And so now these devices can use authentication. We want consumers to start understanding when sites are using FIDO authentication. And so we've introduced the iMark as a way to do a couple things. One, give service providers who are deploying FIDO a way of letting their users know how they're being authenticated. Using FIDO authentication, it's a better and easier user experience. It protects privacy. The biometrics, your biometrics never leave the device if anyone's kind of scared about that. But these are all things that FIDO stands for. So we've introduced the mark, but also a website that they can point their consumers to called loginwithfido.com that has very high level, consumer-friendly messaging and none of this jargon that comes out of my mouth. Very simple, plain speak about what this means. On that page also, the other thing we hear a lot from service providers who are pushing their companies to deploy FIDO, there's two pieces of this website. One is for consumers. The other one is for service providers. It talks about the benefits of protecting your consumers, protecting your employees, how to deploy it, how to share this language with your customers. So our goal here is to again grease the skids to accelerate adoption of FIDO, so that people can leverage the devices and the capabilities that are in their hands. And so service providers can more easily and more quickly actually bring this benefit to their consumers, and their consumers will be aware of what they're doing.
And so how are you getting the word out, about this? Is this part of your CMO, hat?
Yeah, I mean, so FIDO, as an organization, we do three things, right? We create specifications, right, for user authentication, which we've talked about. we certify them. So we build a B2B ecosystem, right? So we certify products that adhere, they conform to specifications and they interoperate with one another, right? So if, CyberHero, website wants to deploy FIDO, you can actually license, technology from any of these vendors, on the server side, on the client side, the authenticator. These things are proven to interoperate, right? So that builds B2B ecosystem. The third thing we do as an organization is try to educate people and drive adoption. So some of this is, yes, traditional marketing. Some of it is internal marketing. We have a membership of 250 companies worldwide, with every major platform provider, device manufacturer, many leading banks, mobile network operators. They're all involved in the organization. So yes, our education goes out externally to the masses, to consumers, to service providers, developers, you name it. But also we have a really strong base internally. We're focused a lot on educating these folks to push them along in their own FIDO development and deployment plans.
Wow, it sounds pretty integrated, like a 360-degree sort of approach, and congratulations on having such a robust membership behind a singular initiative. George, I was talking to a friend of mine over at CISA, the government's cybersecurity organization, and they're launching or working now on a program. I don't know if I'm making news here or not, but it's called login.gov. And I'm wondering, one of the questions and the things I was talking to him about was this idea of blockchain and latency. Tell us about that. Is the blockchain fast enough to provide frictionless user experience?
Yeah, Gary, that's very, very good question, and that's most a misconception out in the world. And the misconception, it comes when the blockchain is being associated with the cryptocurrency and the amount of power that it takes, and the CPU to mine the crypto, use to get into actual Bitcoin or Ethereum. When you're talking about in that specific area, when we're talking the initial coin offerings or the cryptocurrencies, yes, you need to have some powerful machines to do that. However, blockchain is very, very slick, sexy, I would say, platform that it can be utilizing to, and it's being utilizing by the industry giants that are out there, and we know who they are without saying their names. They're already doing supply chain, they're using it in agriculture, they're using it in factories and so forth. Blockchain is a beast that it needs to be transformed to a beauty. And it's uncharted waters right now. What we've done, and I've done research in that, there is areas that there are still undiscoverable. Like, for example, they just scratching the surface. You see in the pattern we make reference to the DApp and the ZK protocol. What we will be using this to bring blockchain into a point that the consumers or the industry, and the governments, they can use that, for identity and access management, for again, to be specific, for their devices, because that's what devices they're lacking in conjunction with the microchip that we have. So you will see in my logo here, it has the word cyber with number 3, and then the aliens. So aliens actually, it's an acronym that we came in through this pattern. It's autonomous, local, intelligent, encrypted network services. So once you have that with the blockchain, you getting much more efficiency frequencies from your input into the computing power to do a transaction, to perform a transaction. And I'm not talking about the validation from what Andrew said, we're using the FIDO, you put a password, use an identity into the monitor. I'm talking down to the local level, that's where it starts, on the local level of your device. And your device now is getting that power um, into the stream to get faster results back. So latencies and things of that nature. If we're in an ecosystem that all these things are happening, it would be more effective and more faster, and security would be enhanced. Now, if you strip it off from these three components and you're trying to do it separately, that's a different discussion, and areas that you might experience in latencies and stuff like that.
So, George, as we're wrapping up, wow, I could listen to both of you for days and days. This is incredibly interesting. George, what's next for you? What do you need? Are you going to be seeking investments, strategic, partners? So you have this beautiful, patent, but it's just a piece of paper, until something happens.
Yeah.
What do you need, and how can our audience help you?
Very good question. I appreciate that, Gary. Yeah, absolutely. We gave birth to a baby, and now we're going to have to go through the steps to teach the baby how to eat, walk, play, educate it, and that's what we are. I'm an inventor. I need help. I just started kickstarted a startup, Cyber Alliance, So yes, we're going to be looking for seed funding. We're going to looking for venture capital. We're going to looking for people to volunteer for courtesy for a board of advisors to help us, get this into the masses and promote it out to educate the world. How can make their lives more secure, more effective, more efficient. So yes, we have. I have a plan to do all this. But I'm going to be needing a lot of help, and hopefully people that they listen to this, they will come forward, and I'm open to discussion with anyone out there.
Yeah, and for our audience, we're going to be having contact information for both of today's guests, as well as relevant websites in our show notes, so that you can connect with them as well. So Andrew, let me ask you the same question. You're in a very different place. You're mature, relatively speaking. I mean, you have, a few hundred.
My wife would disagree with you, but yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm not talking about your personality. I'm talking about like sort of a process.
Yeah.
But so what do you need? How can our audience, help you get your word out, support, the FIDO Alliance, and how can we help?
No, I think, FIDO in some ways has reached a peak of maturity. The specifications are mature. They're being adopted into platforms, but, we need people to deploy. And so it's interesting, Gary, you cite login.gov, the government site for U.S. services, that actually supports FIDO. It supported latest specifications. I think their preferred means of second factor authentication are using FIDO security keys. So that's a great example of someone who's using FIDO. But the next step now this is why we launched iMark, is to start educating consumers on what they're doing. eBay is now supporting FIDO. If you have an Android phone, go log into eBay with your phone, ebay.com, and you'll see the FIDO experience. So I think our focus very much at this point is on driving adoption. And so I guess if there's a call, request for action, is if you're a developer with a service provider, you're thinking about how to implement user authentication, take a look at FIDO, come to our site. We have good developer resources and ways to help you get started, either directly or connecting you with the vendor, so that you can protect your company and protect your customers. I mean, ultimately, the goal here is to have better security, but also to improve everyone's bottom line. I believe in standards, but I don't think you need to be fully altruistic. Everyone's involved with this to better their businesses and better society, which I think is a good thing. So I'd encourage people to take a look at FIDO as they're seeking to deploy better user authentication.
Well, on that note, thanks so much to Andrew and George for this incredible interview. And as I mentioned, to learn more, we'll have their contact information and other relevant information in the show notes. If you would like to be a guest on our show, just send an email to me at Gary@cyberheroes with an S, comics with an S.com. And we hope this helps. Have a great day.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.